Welcome back to D&H. I'm Clark.
And I'm Alicia.
Today we are taking a trip to, well, to the absolute top of the map.
Oh, the way up.
We're looking at a place that, it takes up a massive amount of visual real estate on every single classroom globe you've ever seen.
Right, it looks huge on a Mercator projection.
Exactly. But it usually takes up very, very little space in our daily conversations.
Unless, of course, you've been doom scrolling the news feeds lately.
That is the big exception.
Yeah.
We are talking, of course, about Greenland.
Mm-hmm.
And before we get into the ice, the Vikings, the nuclear missiles, all of it, if you are enjoying these deep dives into the hidden mechanics of history and geopolitics, please do us a favor.
Yeah, hit that subscribe button to the channel.
And give us a like. It really, really helps us keep these investigations going.
It does. So, Greenland. I have to be honest, when you first pitched this topic a few months ago, I was a little skeptical.
Oh, I remember.
I had that very standard reaction of, isn't Greenland just a lot of ice?
I mean, you're not wrong. It is 80% ice. I'll give you that.
Right.
But, and this is why I've been wanting to do this deep dive for months, that other 20%.
Yeah.
That is where all the drama lives. I just think Greenland is perpetually underrated. It's so dramatic, it's beautiful, and the history is absolutely wild.
I've definitely come around on that. After digging into the sources for this, I realized my just ice theory was pretty off base.
A little bit.
A lot. We're talking about a narrative that involves Viking murderers,
The best kind.
secret Nazi weather stations, nuclear missiles hidden in moving glaciers, and a very, very modern, very intense geopolitical crisis.
It really is the full spectrum of human ambition and, I guess, failure, all packed onto one single island.
Hmm.
So let's set the scene. I want to start with a cold open, and I mean that literally, it's cold.
Very cold.
It's January 7th, 2025. We are in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland.
Which is a small place, right? It's
Yeah.
not a huge metropolis.
Oh, tiny. About 19,000 people. It's a modern city, for sure, but it's so isolated, just perched on the edge of this massive fjord system,
And the temperature.
12 degrees below zero
Yeah.
Fahrenheit.
Wow.
And touching down on the icy tarmac is a private jet. Out steps Donald Trump Jr., wearing, of course, a bright red Mégier hat.
Just casually landing in the Arctic Circle.
Right. And the scene that the reports from that day describe is, it's just surreal.
I can only imagine.
You have this high-profile American political figure and his whole entourage just walk in the snowy streets of Nuuk. They're handing out cash to locals,
Actual caps.
just handing out money, passing out hats. They're filming the whole thing for a podcast.
It sounds like a publicity stunt, but the stakes here are actually, incredibly high.
They are, because while all this is happening on the ground in Greenland, back in Washington, D.C., his father, President-elect Trump, is telling reporters that he refuses to rule out using military force to acquire the island.
Which, as you can imagine, sets up a massive diplomatic firestorm.
Oh, immediately. Denmark is furious, the EU is completely alarmed, and the Greenlandic government is, rightfully panicked.
Of course.
But here's the thing that absolutely blew my mind when I started digging into the historical context for this. This isn't new.
And not at all.
This is actually the 6th time an American president has tried to buy or otherwise acquire Greenland since 1867.
It just highlights how strategically valuable this land has always been perceived as. It's not just about ego or, a vanity project.
Not at all. Andrew Johnson tried after buying Alaska. Harry Truman tried. He literally offered $100 million in gold bars in 1946.
$100 million in gold.
That's incredible.
So yeah, people have been trying to control Greenland for a very, very long time. So today, we're going to unpack all of it. We're going to cover 4,500 years of history. We're going to try and solve the mystery of the vanishing Vikings.
A great mystery.
We're going to look at that time the U.S. Army tried to build a literal city under the ice.
It sounds like fiction, but it's not. And we're going to talk about why, right now, in this moment, the world's superpowers are fighting over this melting island at the top of the world.
And I think the best place to start is way back, long before the private jets or the gold bars.
Way, way back. Let's dial the clock back to around 2500 BCE.
This is the era of the Sequoc people. And what's fascinating here is how they even arrived. We usually think of migration as involving, boats or crossing land bridges when sea levels were lower.
Right.
The Sequoc didn't sail, they walked.
Walked, as in across the ocean.
They walked across the frozen sea ice. The genetic analysis that the sources point to is really clear on this. The Sequoc people originally came from Siberia.
Siberia, so they came all the way across.
They migrated across the Bering Strait, trekked through the entirety of what is now Alaska and the Canadian Arctic, and then at the very end of that journey, they crossed the sea ice into northern Greenland.
That has to be one of the longest, most brutal migrations in all of human history.
It's almost unimaginable. Ideally, you'd want a boat, but they did it on foot. And they were walking into an environment that was, incredibly hostile.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, the archaeologists call this period survival on the edge. And there is this recurring pattern in Greenland's prehistory that I found really haunting when I was reading about it. It's this pattern of disappearance.
What do you mean by that? A pattern of disappearance?
Well, you just look at the timeline. You have the Sequoc. They arrive, they establish a culture, they learn to survive for centuries, and then, poof, they vanish from the archaeological record.
Gone.
Completely. Then you have the Dorset culture. Same story. They arrive, they survive for a long time, and then they vanish. Then you have the Independence and Independence 2 cultures. Same thing.
That's almost like a horror movie setup. The island just consumes them.
It kind of is, and it really seems to come down to adaptation or a lack of it. These early cultures were incredibly specialized. They were masters of their specific niche.
So, for example, they might have only hunted one specific animal.
Exactly. Maybe they hunted muskox almost exclusively. But then if the climate shifted even a little bit, or the muskox population dropped because of a hard winter,
They had no backup plan.
none. They were too rigid. Their specialization became a fatal weakness.
But then, around 1200 CE, we finally get a success story.
We do. The Thule people arrive, and these are the direct ancestors of the modern Inuit.
And they succeeded where everyone else had failed.
Yes, and the question is why?
So what was their secret sauce? What did they have?
Technology, for one. A huge leap in technology. And a philosophy of just pure flexibility. The Thule brought the kayak with them, which is, frankly, an engineering marvel.
Let's unpack the kayak for a second, because the sources go into some really amazing detail on this. This is not the recreational boat we see on, lakes today.
No, not at all.
It's more like a fighter jet for the ocean.
That's a great way to put it. It's a frame made of whatever driftwood they could find, or whalebone, then stretched over with waterproof sealskin. But the key innovation is that it's designed to be sealed around the paddler's waist.
So you become part of the boat.
Exactly, you're one unit. And that allowed them to develop the Eskimo roll, the ability to flip completely upside down and then right yourself without ever leaving the boat.
Which is absolutely non-negotiable in Arctic waters.
Right. If you fall into the water in Greenland, you have seconds, literally seconds, before the cold shock incapacitates you. The kayak allowed them to stay dry and keep hunting.
And they combined that with another piece of incredible tech.
The toggle harpoon.
This was the other thing that caught my eye. It's such a simple but brilliant mechanism.
It is. The problem with a regular spear, is that if you stab a seal or a walrus, the spearhead might slide back out, or the animal might dive and snap the shaft.
You lose the kill.
You lose the kill and you lose your weapon. The toggle harpoon has a head that detaches from the shaft once it's inside the animal.
And it pivots sideways, right? It toggles?
It toggles, exactly. It acts like an anchor under the skin and the blubber.
So it's impossible to pull out.
Right. It turns the weapon into a secure towing device attached by a line. This allowed them to hunt massive calorie sources, whales, walrus, big seals, without losing the catch. It was a game changer.
And beyond just the tools, you said they had the right mindset.
They were generalists. Unlike all those previous groups that vanished, the Thule didn't rely on just one food source. If the whales weren't there one season, they hunted seals. If the seals were scarce, they fished. If the ice moved, they packed up their dog sleds and moved with it.
They flowed with the environment rather than trying to fight it.
Perfectly said. They were adaptable.
Which brings us, of course, to a group of people who were, well, let's say they were a little less willing to flow with the environment.
Yes. The Vikings.
The Vikings. This is where the story gets really cinematic. And we have to start with the man himself, Eric the Red.
A man whose reputation definitely preceded him.
Talk about a rap sheet. We think of Viking, we think it's tough, but this guy was a walking HR violation.
Laughs. That's putting it mildly. The man was a menace.
So let's just look at his record, okay? His own father was exiled from Norway for murder.
So it runs in the family.
Apparently. The family moves to Iceland to start over. Then Eric grows up, and promptly gets himself exiled from Iceland.
And why?
For murder. He murdered his neighbor.
And his neighbor's servants, I believe.
Right. The whole dispute started over a landslide that damaged a house, and it ended with Eric killing everyone involved.
Just an unbelievable escalation.
But he wasn't done. He then kills another man, a guy named Thorgest, and his sons, because of a fight over some stolen religious pillars.
He just had an uncontrollable temper. The sources paint him with this bright red hair, red beard, and a fiery, violent personality to match.
Absolutely. So the Icelandic Assembly, the all thing, they finally have enough. They sentence him to 3 years of exile. Basically, get out of here. You were too much trouble for this island.
So he has to go somewhere?
He has to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So he sails west.
Into the complete unknown.
Totally unknown. And he finds this massive landmass. Now, context here is absolutely key. This was during the medieval warm period.
Right. It was a bit warmer globally than it is even today.
It was. So when he sailed into these deep fjords in the southwest of Greenland, they actually were green. There was grass. There were birch and willow trees.
It looked viable for farming, which was the entire basis of the Norse way of life.
Exactly. So he spends his 3 years of exile exploring, naming everything after himself, of course, Eric's Fjord, Eric's Island.
As one does.
And then he goes back to Iceland with a business pitch. And this is what I love. He is arguably the first great real estate marketing genius in history.
Because of the name he chose.
The name. He calls it Greenland. And the sagas are very explicit about this. They record him saying people would be attracted to go there if it had a favorable name.
It was essentially false advertising.
The total scam. It's 80% ice. But my God, it worked.
It absolutely did. 25 ships full of families and livestock left Iceland with him to colonize this new land.
Though only 14 of them actually made it through the rough North Atlantic seas. But still, they established these settlements, the Eastern Settlement and the Western Settlement.
And for a while, it worked surprisingly well. They were farming cattle in the Arctic.
Which is just mind-boggling. It required them to spend their entire short summer season harvesting hay to keep the animals alive through the incredibly long, dark winter.
They were building these huge turf barns, stone churches, even a cathedral. They were basically recreating Norway in a place that was definitely not Norway.
And they were connected to Europe. This is the part that surprised me. They weren't just isolated hermits living at the edge of the world. They were exporting luxury goods.
The polar bear trade.
Yes. The polar bear trade.
This is such a great detail. They were capturing and shipping live polar bear cubs to European kings and nobles as status symbols.
Can you just take a moment to imagine the logistics of that? In the 10th century, you have to capture a polar bear cub, which likely means killing its very angry mother, get it onto a Viking longship.
Keep it alive and fed on a journey across the stormiest ocean on the planet.
And deliver it to a king in, say, Norway, without getting your entire crew mauled. It's incredible.
The sources mention one was even sent all the way to the Sultan of Egypt.
That is just wild. A Greenlandic polar bear in medieval Cairo? It really shows you how globalized the world was even then.
And of course, we can't forget that this Greenland settlement was the launch pad for the first European discovery of North America.
Leif Erikson, Eric's son. He sails from Greenland to a place he calls Vinland, which we now know is Nassau Meadows in Newfoundland.
But we should also mention Eric's daughter, Freydis. She's a character we absolutely have to talk about.
A terrifying character.
But the apple did not fall far from the tree there.
Not at all. The story goes that on an expedition to Vinland, she got into a conflict with some rival colonists. She wanted them dead, but her husband refused to kill the women in the other party.
So Freydis grabbed an axe.
And did it herself.
Brutal. But the Vinland settlement, it didn't last. And eventually, the Greenland settlement didn't last either.
And this is the great mystery. It's the detective story of the medieval world.
It really is. They were there for almost 500 years. That's longer than the United States has existed as a country.
A long, long time. And then just silence.
The Western settlement is found abandoned around the year 1350. The Eastern settlement holds on for a bit longer. The very last written record we have from Norse Greenland is an account of a wedding.
Just a normal, everyday event.
A wedding at Falsey Church in 1408. A man named Thorstein and a woman named Sigrid get married. We have the document. And then, nothing.
Radio silence for centuries.
For centuries. When other Europeans finally came back 300 years later, all they found were ruins. No bodies, no signs of a battle, just empty farmsteads with the roofs caved in.
So the great question is, what happened to them?
For a very long time, the simple theory was just, it got too cold. The Little Ice Age started.
Which is true. It definitely did get colder. But modern science has given us a much more nuanced and, frankly, a much more devastating picture. It wasn't just the temperature.
No. The sources point to a major 2024 study that analyzed sediment cores from a lake bed near one of the settlements. And it shows that along with the cold, there was a catastrophic multi-decade drought.
And if you're a cattle farmer, drought is actually worse than cold.
So much worse. If the grass doesn't grow in the summer, you can't harvest enough hay. If you don't have enough hay, you can't feed your cows through the winter. If your cows die, your colony starves.
And on top of that, there was a major economic crash.
The walrus ivory crash.
Which sounds like a stock market headline from the year 1300.
It basically was. Greenland's entire export economy ran on walrus ivory. It was their main connection to Europe, their cash crop.
But then, elephant ivory started flooding the European markets from trade routes in Africa.
And it was higher quality, it was whiter, and it was cheaper. Suddenly, the one thing Greenland had to sell became almost worthless.
So you have climate change, you have economic collapse, and then there is this really weird fact about sea levels that I had never heard of before.
This is the most counterintuitive part of the whole story. We usually think of ice ages as meaning lower sea levels because so much water is locked up in ice.
Right.
But in Greenland itself, the ice sheet grew so massive and so heavy during the Little Ice Age that its sheer weight pushed the Earth's crust down.
The process is called isostatic depression.
Exactly. The land itself sank, and this caused the local sea level to rise by about 3 meters, or nearly 10 feet.
So their best farms, which were all along the coast in the fjords, were literally flooding while they were simultaneously freezing and going broke.
It was a perfect storm of disasters. And the verdict from archaeologists now, based on the lack of bodies or chaos in the ruins, is that it wasn't a massacre. It was likely a very orderly evacuation.
They just packed up and left.
They realized the Viking way of life farming cattle, living in these stone houses, stubbornly refusing to eat fish, which the saga suggests.
Wait, they wouldn't eat fish?
The archaeological evidence from their trash heaps shows very few fish bones. It seems to have been a cultural taboo, maybe seen as peasants' food.
While the Thuls are thriving right next door, hunting seals and whales and fishing.
Exactly. The Norse refused to adapt. They clung so tightly to their European identity that it ultimately killed their colony. They chose to leave rather than change.
That is a powerful, powerful lesson in adaptation.
It is. Adapt or die is very, very literal in the Arctic.
So the Vikings leave. The Inuit reclaim the entire island for themselves. And for the next 300 years or so, Greenland is essentially cut off from Europe again. Until 1721.
Enter Hans Egede.
The stubborn priest.
Very stubborn. He sails to Greenland with this completely bizarre mission. He wants to find the lost Viking colonists because he assumes they're still there, and he wants to convert them to Protestantism.
He's worried they're still Catholic after all this time.
He thinks he's going to find medieval Norsemen just waiting for a theological update on the Reformation.
So he gets there, and of course...
There are no Vikings, only Inuit.
So he just pivots.
He does. He decides, well, I'm here now. I might as well convert the Inuit instead. And this marks the beginning of the formal colonial era.
And Clark, we have to be honest here. This era has some very, very dark chapters.
Yeah, the sources highlight a couple of specific tragedies that really define the difficult relationship between Greenland and Denmark to this day. First, almost immediately, there was smallpox, brought by a returning Inuit boy on a Danish ship in 1733. It wiped out an estimated 3,000 Inuit, a massive percentage of the entire population at the time.
And then, much more recently, in the 20th century, we have something that was known simply as the experiment.
This story is just heartbreaking. In 1951, the Danish government took 22 Inuit children, some as young as 5 to 8 years old, away from their families.
With the stated goal of what?
The goal was to take them to Denmark, re-educate them, and civilize them. The idea was to create a new Danish-speaking elite who could serve as a bridge between the two cultures.
To make them model Danes who could lead Greenland into the future.
Exactly. But the result was just catastrophic trauma. The children lost their language, they were completely alienated from their own culture, and when they were eventually returned to Greenland, they weren't even sent back to their parents.
Oh, where did they go?
They were placed in an orphanage in Nuuk, so they could continue their Danish education completely separated from their communities. It was a lifelong tragedy for the survivors.
Just devastating. And then there is the IUD scandal, which is even more recent and, if possible, even more sinister.
This is a major source of political anger and investigation right now. Between about 1966 and 1975, Danish authorities inserted IUDs into an estimated 4,500 Inuit women and girls,
And many of them were incredibly young.
some as young as 13. And it was often done without their knowledge or full consent, sometimes during routine school medical exams. The goal was to limit the Inuit population growth.
It's eugenics, plain and simple.
It is. And when you hear modern Greenlandic politicians talk about these shackles of colonialism, this is the kind of thing they are talking about. It's not ancient history. It's living memory for a lot of families.
So that is the incredibly fraught colonial backdrop. But then World War II happens, and suddenly Greenland stops being just a remote Danish colony and becomes a crucial strategic linchpin for the entire war.
The Weather War.
I love this part of the history because it feels like an action movie that for some reason nobody has ever made.
It's incredibly high stakes. When Germany occupied Denmark in 1940, Greenland was cut off. The U.S., under the Monroe Doctrine, basically stepped in to protect it from falling into Nazi hands.
But the Germans knew something vital about Greenland.
They knew that North Atlantic weather dictates European weather.
If you want to plan a bombing raid on London, or later if you want to plan for D-Day, you absolutely need to know what the weather is doing over Greenland first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the Nazis started setting up these clandestine secret weather stations on the extremely remote east coast of the island.
And this leads to one of the most amazing units of the war, the Sledge Patrol.
The Army of Greenland, which was, it was basically a handful of Danish and Norwegian hunters and local Inuit on dog sleds.
Patrolling thousands and thousands of miles of empty ice, looking for any sign of the Germans.
And there's this specific story in the sources about a man named Eli Nilsen.
It's March 1943. He's out on patrol, and he spots a German station. But the Germans spot him too.
And you have this incredible chase scene across the ice, heavily armed Nazi soldiers on skis chasing a lone hunter on a dog sled.
It's so intense. He ends up getting ambushed, his dogs are killed, and he has to flee on foot across the glacier.
But because he found them, because of that patrol, the Americans were able to pinpoint the station's location and send in bombers to destroy it. It just goes to show that even the most remote place on Earth was not safe from the war.
And once the Americans were there, they did not want to leave.
No. The war ended, but the Cold War started almost immediately. And Greenland's location. It went from important to arguably the most important piece of real estate on the planet for nuclear strategy.
Because it's the shortest flight path for a missile or a bomber between Moscow and Washington.
Right over the pole.
Exactly. So the U.S. builds the massive Thule Air Base in the far north. It's codenamed Putufik.
But just building the base created another tragedy.
It did. They displaced the local Inuit people, giving them just 4 days' notice in the middle of winter to move their entire village over 100 miles north to make room for the base.
It's just unbelievable. And then from that base, they decide to do something truly, frankly, insane.
Project Iceworm.
This sounds like a James Bond villain's plot.
It really does. It's completely absurd. So the public cover story was a project called Camp Century. It was built as a scientific research station built inside the ice sheet.
Tunnels carved right into the glacier. A whole city under the snow, with labs, a hospital, a movie theater, all powered by a portable nuclear reactor they buried in the ice. But that was just the cover.
The real mission was so much bigger.
So much more terrifying. The secret plan, Project Iceworm, was to build 2,500 miles of tunnels under the ice sheet to hide 600 nuclear missiles.
And they were going to put them on railway cars.
On railway cars, under the ice.
So they could constantly move them around so the Soviets could never pinpoint their location for a first strike.
It was supposed to be the ultimate survivable nuclear deterrent.
But there was a fatal flaw in the plan. A flaw that really anyone who knows anything about glaciers could have pointed out from the beginning.
Ice moves.
Ice moves. It's a frozen river, not a static block. The glacier slowly but unstoppably squeezed and crushed the tunnels. The walls started warping. The ceilings started caving in.
The entire project was a failure. They had to abandon the whole thing in 1967.
But, and here is the really scary part for today, they didn't clean up when they left.
No, they assumed the ice and snow would just bury it all forever, a sarcophagus of ice.
So they left behind 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, unknown quantities of radioactive coolant from the nuclear reactor, toxic PCBs, and tons of raw sewage.
And now, with climate change, the ice is melting.
And all of that toxic waste is slowly migrating toward the surface. Scientists predict it could be exposed by the year 2090. a literal toxic legacy of the Cold War just waiting to emerge.
And that's not even the only nuclear incident. We have to mention the Broken Arrow.
Right, the 1968 crash. A B-52 bomber carrying 4 hydrogen bombs experienced a fire on board and crashed onto the sea ice near Thule.
The conventional explosives in 3 of the bombs detonated, scattering radioactive material over a huge area.
And one of the bombs was never fully recovered. The nuclear core broke through the ice.
And it's likely still at the bottom of Baffin Bay. It just highlights again and again how Greenland was used as this passive platform for these incredibly dangerous games, often without the full consent or even the knowledge of the people living there.
Which brings us to the present day, because the game has not stopped. It's just changed players, and the prize has changed.
Now it's all about resources.
Treasure in the melting ice.
We've mentioned the ice is melting, and as it recedes, it's revealing what could be one of the largest untapped caches of mineral wealth on the planet, specifically rare earth elements.
And we are not talking about small amounts here.
No. Some estimates suggest Greenland holds around 36 million tons of rare earths. That is enough to potentially break China's current monopoly on the global market.
And to be clear, these are the minerals we need for literally everything in the modern green and digital economy.
Everything. Electric vehicle batteries, wind turbines, fighter jets, your smartphone.
So there's this one massive deposit, Kvanefjeld, in southern Greenland. It's considered world-class. But there is a catch.
A big catch. The ore is mixed with uranium.
And this is where the local politics gets really, really interesting. Because you'd think a country desperate for economic independence would be rushing to mine this cash cow.
But in 2021, a new Greenlandic government was elected on a platform of environmentalism, and one of their first acts was to pass a law banning uranium mining.
Which effectively blocked the entire Kvanefjeld project.
Exactly, and it created this huge conflict within Greenland. They want the money from mining to finally gain full independence from Denmark, but they don't want to destroy their pristine, fragile environment to get it.
Talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place.
It is the central dilemma of modern Greenlandic identity and politics.
And while they're debating this amongst themselves, the sharks are circling. Which brings us right back to Donald Trump.
The geopolitical crisis, part 2.
So 2019, Trump says he wants to buy Greenland. Everyone laughs. The Danish prime minister calls it absurd. It's a joke on late-night TV for a week.
But then 2024 to 2026 happen. Trump returns to the presidency, and he's not joking anymore.
Not at all. The rhetoric shifts from a real estate deal to a national security necessity. He appoints a special envoy, Jeff Landry, with the specific mission to make Greenland American.
And the pressure becomes intense. There are threats of massive tariffs on Denmark if they don't cooperate.
And there is this one detail in the sources that I just could not believe. The Nobel Prize incident.
Oh, this is unique.
So apparently, according to reports, Trump explicitly linked his new aggression on Greenland to being snubbed for the Nobel Peace Prize. He messaged the Norwegian Prime Minister,
who heads the Nobel Committee,
saying that because of the snub, he no longer feels an obligation to think purely of peace.
It's almost Shakespearean in its pettiness, but with, enormous global consequences.
And the people of Greenland are not having any of it.
No. Polls show something like 85% of Greenlanders are opposed to joining the U.S. There are mass demonstrations in Nuuk. The slogan is "No means no."
But they do want independence, right? Just not American annexation.
That's the key point. They want to be their own independent nation. But they currently rely on a $600 million annual subsidy from Denmark to keep their public services running.
So to become independent, they have to replace that money.
Which brings us right back to the dilemma of mining versus the environment. It's a vicious cycle.
And looming over all of this politics, all of this history, is the climate reality.
Which is, frankly, terrifying.
Let's just hit the raw stats for a second.
The Greenland ice sheet contains enough water to raise global sea levels by 23 to 24 feet.
24 feet. Let that sink in. That is Miami gone. That is most of Bangladesh underwater. That is central London flooding regularly.
And it's melting at an accelerating rate. About 270 billion tons of ice per year is pouring into the ocean.
And as sources say, some of this is already locked in.
Yes. Even if we stopped all carbon emissions today, magically we are already committed to at least nearly a foot of sea level rise just from the warming that's already happened.
And it affects the ocean currents too, right?
Right. The AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, basically the Gulf Gulf Stream. All of that cold, fresh water dumping into the North Atlantic is slowing down the current that brings warm water up from the tropics and keeps Europe relatively mild.
So you could have this bizarre, paradoxical scenario where the Arctic is on fire while Europe freezes.
It's a global climate system, and Greenland is a critical switch on the control panel. What happens there doesn't stay there.
It's a global catastrophe starting on this one island.
It really is the bellwether for the entire planet.
So what does this all mean? We've covered 4,500 years, we've seen cultures rise and fall, we've seen empires and superpowers try to claim it and control it.
I think the recurring theme here is resilience versus hubris.
Say more about that.
Well, just look at the Norse Vikings. They arrived with hubris. They thought they could impose their northern European farming lifestyle on the Arctic. They refused to adapt. They failed.
And the U.S. military with Project Iceworm.
Pure hubris. They thought their technology could conquer a literal glacier. They failed. Trump thinks he can just buy a country and its people. That's hubris.
And on the other side, you have the Inuit.
Pure resilience. Adaptation. They have a principle that's become a political slogan. Nothing about us without us.
I like that.
They survived the little ice age that drove the Vikings out. They survived centuries of colonialism. And now they are navigating this incredible storm of geopolitics and climate change.
It really puts the whole buy Greenland idea in a different perspective. It's not just a piece of land on a monopoly board, it's a home.
A home with a deep, complex, and often painful history, and a people who have proven time and again that they are tougher than the ice itself.
I think that is the perfect place to leave it. This has been quite a journey.
It really has. From the first people walking across the ice to a potential battleground for the 21st century.
And to our listeners, next time you look at a map and see that big white shape at the top of the world, remember, it's not just ice.
It's a battleground, a treasure chest, and a profound warning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
And please share this with your family and friends who love history.
I'm Clark.
I'm Alicia.
We'll see you next time.